All right, so that's better?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. I will be talking for about half an hour, and then there's some time for us to talk, which I'm really looking forward to, because that's like why I'm here, to get into a discussion, especially on this day, because I think this topic is more related to what's happening right now than it might be to typography, which I will also be talking about, but maybe rather briefly. So, the project I'm talking about is called Margaret van Eyck Renaming an Institution, a case study. And so this is what Carol just mentioned, what I usually do as a graphic designer. That's not what we're talking about today. Today I'm talking about April 2017, because that month I moved from Berlin to Maastricht in the south of the Netherlands. And why I went there is, it's not a city, it's a rather tiny place. It's like a little medieval town in the very south. So why did I go there? Because of this place. It's called Van Eyck, or Jan van Eyck Academie, a post-academic institute for fine art, design and reflection. And it's basically an artist-in-residence program. So each year they would invite around 30 to 40 people, artists, designers, curators, writers, photographers, architects, researchers. It's a very international program. So for the graphic designers amongst you, there are some US American people who've been there, for example, Andrew Blaufeld, Rick Poyner, Louis Sandhaus, Lorraine Wild. They've all taught or studied there at some point in the past, just to give you an idea of this institution. So, and I will just briefly also talk about the actual space, the architecture, because that will be of interest later on in my talk. So here you see the entrance area, the main staircase. Then there's an auditorium. They have a couple of workshops, which they call labs. So this would be the printing workshop for Reso and screen print, and then that's the print lab. And there's a wood workshop, a metal workshop, the lab for nature research. The library is also a lab. So then upon arriving there, you're assigned to a studio, and then you also get a monthly stipend. This actually is my studio. The first day I arrived there, and sorry. During my first week, I was walking around the building, exploring, and I realized that not only the academy, Jan van Eyck, but also all of those labs that I've been talking about before are named after men. And there's no information given whatsoever about these men. It's just names written rather prominently above all the entrance doors on the building itself. And at first I thought, okay, maybe that's people who donated money, people who, I don't know, subsidized these labs, but interestingly enough, it's not. So this is an overview to give you an idea of the structure of this institution. There's Van Eyck, and that comprises of the 2 academies and then the 5 different labs. As you can see, like I said earlier, all named after men. So, and this really stuck with me, and I kept asking myself, why is that? And decided to start an investigation. And so where else to start than with like the most obvious name of the overall thing, Jan van Eyck, painter of the Northern Renaissance. And I was reading at that time a book. This is the cover. It's called The Book of Scotland by Scottish author, writer, musician Momus. And on the cover there's this quote, "Every lie creates a parallel world, the world in which it is true." And that kind of really stuck with me during that time. That was always something that's been on my mind. So it became the leitmotiv for what I was doing, and I decided to create a parallel world of my own. And this is actually where Margaret van Eyck comes into play, finally. This is her. Actually, it's one of her, because there's two historic figures of that same name, both of which, sadly, very few records are kept on. One of them was the wife of Jan van Eyck and took over the family's painting workshop after his passing. So she was a a businesswoman and also a single mom. The other Margaret, coincidentally of the same name, was one of Jan's siblings. So in the family you had three brothers, Jan, Lambert and Hubert, and then also their sister Margaret. She was, as far as we know, an artist in her own right, working with her brothers, but not signing any work actually. Okay, so when I arrived, the situation already was like this. The Academy had officially dropped the Jan from their overall name, but it kind of still existed. People were still referring to the place as Jan van Eyck. But it was not written on the facade, on the outside of the building. So what I did in this first week is I took a photo of the outside wall next to the main entrance, and then in Photoshop just added the name of Margaret in the spot where Jan used to be, and then had this printed on this really large sheet of paper and hung it on the wall in my studio. Just kind of creating this lie that was earlier mentioned on the book cover that would soon leap into reality, because whenever people would come do studio visits with me, this was already on the wall, so there was already something for us to talk about, or some vision of what things could also be. And so I did some further research and had the idea of coming up with female names for all of the male labs. And I chose those names. These are all actual women, actual persons, as are the male ones. And I chose them by exactly the same principles that supposedly the male names were chosen by. So I was trying to stay within this weird system. And that is, they're all deceased, all white males, all somehow connected to either the city of Maastricht or the province, and then also in their biography connected to the lab's profession. So for instance, Pierre Camp Lab, which is the library of Van Eyck Academy, is named after Pierre Camp, a poet, and Therese Cornet's lab now is named after Therese Cornet, a famous Dutch translator of literary works. And this is true of all of them. And I actually got the Academy to the point that all of these names were applied throughout the building and also on the website. So now all these labs do have two names. And I wanted to talk about how this was possible to happen, and this is also where the graphic design aspect of my talk comes in, because in hindsight I was thinking that it was kind of a way of sneaking in and then staying. So this idea of a Trojan horse approach of sorts, or a virus that is invading and infecting an institution and then spreading. And spreading by infecting the omnipresent visual identity with very basic means of graphic design, a form of mimicry, because I was using their existing branding language of both the space and the printed matter. I've shown the space to you before, and now in the following I just want to quickly give you an idea of their very present, very distinct visual identity, which has been in place since 2013. Whenever there's a new director, they usually radically change the institution. This one, like I said, was done 5 years ago by a Dutch design studio called Meus Antwerp. So these are some examples, and I think what really stands out is this very distinct typeface. Sorry. It is called Bond Pike, was commissioned by that Dutch graphic design studio, and is actually based on the Academy's janitors' brush lettering. So they had a caretaker and sign painter work at the Academy for years, throughout I think the 80s and 90s, and he would basically label everything. If there's a letter in the woodshop, it's probably him who wrote Van Eyck on that, and there's these signs all over the place, keep doors free. So these designers set out to commission someone to turn that into an actual digital typeface, which is now used widely. And this is kind of a crucial point in the whole project, because this very typeface is, in my idea, what actually enabled the project to happen in the first place. And I chose this typeface mainly because it was easier for the institution to accept. It was a less obvious intrusion, so to say, and not violating their visual identity or branding, which they are very fond of. This is an image of the outside next to the main entrance, and then we actually had a company come over and install the new name on top of the already existing one, so that it would look like this in the end. And it was kind of important for me to not erase something, but rather to add something, and thus creating a tension or a space of in-between, a moment of possibility and fluidity, and also a starting point for the discussion. And unfortunately, this is what the whole thing looked like after only 2 weeks, because there was apparently an anti-gravity layer of paint on the wall, and the Academy would not agree to have that taken down and then actually paint the name. So we came up with this idea of just using those vinyl stickers and apply to the wall. But then, like I said, after only 2 weeks it fell down. We tried a second time. That one went even worse. And yeah, so after 2 weeks there was just this empty spot again, and I agreed with the board of directors and the management to keep it like this, to just have Margaret appear and disappear as this very ephemeral, almost ghost, and then people who've been around would maybe remember it or have taken pictures, there's documentation of it, but I could not prevent this from happening. So someone, and I'm not entirely sure until this day who was this, put these posters all over the Academy the next day with obviously typos in it, but still it was very nice to see. And this sparked a discussion within the Academy, and then we were able to negotiate that the names of the labs would actually stay permanently, and also the website was going to be changed. And these are the names for the new lab, so kind of the virus that I was talking about earlier, just before invading the building. This one became my best friend, a squeegee, a tool used to rub those layers into the wall. And because they also, even on the inside, kept at least peeling off slightly, so every now and then you would have to go over them with the squeegee again. And this was, to me, a very nice metaphor of how any feminist work in general cannot end. It cannot be brought to an end. It is something that takes a constant effort, and that's something I also talk about later on about these books. But for now, I just want to show you how extensive the whole thing was. So you see the floor plan, and then I took images at all the spaces where there's two names now throughout the whole building. And this is just some more installation shots. It was also interesting that the company was commissioned to do this, and ironically, of course, they sent two guys to put on these women's names, which was nice. And this is what the final installation looked like, just to give you an idea of the space and how the two names interact and relate to each other. What we also did is change the institution's website. So for the duration of Margaret appearing on the outside wall, so for just two weeks in spring, summer 2017, we added this header to the website. And then after she came off, you now have two different websites. There's the Dutch language website using the male names, and if you switch to the English language version, you have the female names. Okay, and I've mentioned this briefly earlier, but the really defining moment for me was to stay within the boundaries of the system and try to change it from the inside. And this strategy was also applied to all the printed matter created for the project. So these are invitation cards, and they, for the opening of Margaret van Eyck Academie, and they were actually using the official visual identity, so the exact same typefaces, layout, format, and so on. And of course, everyone loves tote bags, and the Academy has these. They give them for free at most of the events. People carry them around, so we were also hijacking those by just silk screening the new name on top. And then when I put up these names, I didn't really frame that in any way. So I just had the company come, put them up, and then they existed for 2 months. There was never some kind of official opening or a speech given or something like this is a feminist intervention or institutional critique. I just waited for 2 months to see how people would react, and then after 2 months there was an opening, because during my research I came across a photo album in the archive of the institution, and this is from 1962, and it's the bishop of that municipality inaugurating the Academy's building with a blessing of the house ceremony. So they would take a tour of the whole building and actually go into each and every single room, because they have this very long tradition of being a Catholic art academy starting in 1948. So what we did, and this was really a group effort, we decided to come up with our own kind of counter procession to reclaim the space in the building under the label of Margaret van Eyck. And I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures to give you an idea. So there's the tote bags again, but then also some people created a signature drink for our guests called Margaret's Revenge. There was a procession, as I mentioned earlier, so we would walk throughout all of the Academy, stop at each of the labs, rub in the names again with the squeegee. There was a poet, apparently Klein Sandford. She wrote poems about these 5 women, recited them. What else? There was another artist working with the mimeographs, so she was live printing these poems so that people could take them with them. Then the head of each lab would introduce the women, and we hung up their portraits and work to make them visible in the space. And then I just want to talk about one more thing which was kind of important also for the whole group, and that's something we did in the library, because the library is a very important space, not only in this institution I think, but in most. It's not only a space of meeting, but also a space of representation or misrepresentation. And so there was this idea of somehow transforming that space on the occasion of this opening of Margaret van Eyck. And what we did is we went into the library as a group of 11 artists, friends, participants of this academy, and we actually flipped around all of the books, either authored, edited by males, or concerned with primarily male topics. This took us something like 4 days and 4 nights on and off, close to 34,000 media. We didn't manage to do all of the library, but we got pretty close. And this is just one example of what a shelf usually would look like in the library. And then once we were done, most of them sadly look like this. And this is this was just to create a very impactful visual space for people to experience and then to also draw conclusions from. So of course these results would vary from section to section. I don't know, artist monographs and philosophy would be particularly bad, but then for instance edited books or design publications were a bit more even. And of course this is just one one very arbitrary category or aspect that we went for, but one that was actually doable. I'll just give you a quick impression. What the space looks like. So Jeremy Olsen, another artist in residence, took this footage of the transform library. I just skimmed through because it's 8 minutes, but just to quickly give you an idea of what it maybe felt like to be surrounded by all these books with their spines turned inward. Okay, so this is what we did last year at the Academy, and then because I am a book designer, of course I thought it would be nice to turn all of this into a book. So on my very last week I started collecting all the materials. So this is all the documentation, it's all my research, it's just all the collateral that went into it. And this is a 2-volume publication. The last one has just been out, and we've presented this with our publisher at New York Art Book Fair last weekend. The first one was published in March. And I have these very short videos. So I think they're 1.5 minutes each, just flipping them through so you get an idea. yeah, the first one is really, like I said, collects mainly all the documentation. So it's primarily visual. There's some short form writing in it too, but it just presents these women and then all the interventions that took place in that year, and also some of the effects in the last part of the publication. So this is, for example, the procession that I talked about earlier, and then also the intervention at the library that took place. And I was just trying to find ways how to translate these events into the form of the book so that it would be like a source book that the second publication can draw upon. So you will notice that between the two books there are lots of cross-references. The second one is primarily writing, and for that one I invited a group of people, both from within and outside of the Academy. Their names are on the back, and these are artists, writers, curators, researchers, who each in their own practice deal with topics that are embedded within Margaret van Eyck in a way, but then make connections to other disciplines or other discourses. And like I said, this one's just been out last week. And yeah, it's like a collection of readings or contextualizations of that project. Also problematizing certain aspects of it and just broadening the discussion that took place last year. Again, also trying to play with the form of the book to, on a material level, also engage in this discussion. So this I can just skip because we've just seen it. Oh yeah, I just want to mention that there has been some writing about this, which is really nice, both online and offline. And there's also a Facebook page for Margaret van Eyck Academy. There's an Instagram account for Margaret van Eyck Academy, and all these things, and also the bilingual website, have really helped create and sustain this parallel world. So that, for instance, for last year's round of residencies, people have actually applied to Margaret van Eyck Academy instead of Jan van Eyck Academy. Yeah. Thanks for your attention. And yeah, let's talk. If you have any questions, ideas, remarks, concerns, there's some more copies of the book. You're also welcome to buy them. And maybe also Jessica Segal is an artist who was there at that time too. So I don't know, if you don't mind, we can also talk more. And Elizabeth is the publisher of the book.
Are you playing ukulele? Yes. Yeah, for the,
I still heard, but
Yeah, so
so for the opening, sent out an email asking the artists for their favorite and influential female identified artists. And then we wrote a song, Hot Topic, which you may not know, by Latigro. It's just a list of influential women as a song lyric, and sort of updated it with information about since that song already might be 15, 20 years old. So that was kind of an ongoing theme as we walked throughout the academy.
yeah, and that also made it into the book. It's in the section with the flip books. There's the lyrics. Okay.
I guess as someone who was there and also in this very particular institution and kind of saw how this idea you had that kind of started out as some infection really caught on, and how influenced the participants were who were there to get on board and start, who really wanted to participate in the larger process. It became very communal. I'm curious how, what kind of reception you're getting sort of presenting this project outside of Van Eyck, or if you've seen it, been able to relate it to other design projects.
I mean, this is the second time that I'm talking about this publicly. First time was on Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's still very fresh, especially with the second book just having been released last week. And yeah, so I'm curious to hear. I mean, I've had discussions, of course, with people who are in the book, but now yeah, it's just about to start.
I have a question. It's not so very about design, but like more about your upbringing. Like, you're a feminist, and in the U.S. and you're German, and in the U.S. like it's not frowned upon, but it's really like misunderstood and like a very political topic. So I'm wondering like how you were raised, and if in Germany it's more of like a normal idea or not.
I wish it was.
Okay.
No, I think it's like probably a global problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
But were you raised in a family that was feminist, or with values that led to a project like this naturally?
I prefer not to relate this to my. I don't think it makes a lot of sense in a way. I know it's.
But like for you to make that observation, you are like.
I know it's just maybe a certain state of consciousness
like focus
or awareness. Yeah.
Was there any resistance when you hung the signs and everything?
There was objection to having it painted, like I mentioned before, on the outside wall. They were very resistant to take off this layer of anti-graffiti paint, which I'm not 100% sure if it really existed or not. But so we didn't get to paint it, but for the rest it was very open. I mean, we just had a lot of discussions also with the director and the head of the artistic program, as they call it. And then it just also developed into this thing. So in the beginning there was the idea of just having the name on the outside and just have it maybe for the summer and then take it off again. And I thought, okay, cool, let's do this. But then once the name were up and also the names on the labs were up, it became very obvious that it will create such a weird and bad image for the institution to actually go there and then rip off these women's names off the wall again, that they were kind of forced to keep it. And also within this process, it just became kind of known to people. So people started talking about the director would be approached by people also, I don't know, in Amsterdam or different places, or get emails of people asking them, hey, what is this? Is this really happening? Is this a thing? Yeah, it just grew into this thing, and now it's there for good in a way, but also not, because starting October 1st, there's going to be a new director. And they might or might not change the whole system.
Like they're going to be in it. Like
Maybe, yeah. And then, so now it's a question also of how to frame this. Are these vinyl stickers on the wall as a physical object a work of art, or is it just a label for a space? And I think that's also interesting to see how, what about this is it work, and who is the author of it? Is it the whole group? Is it the institution? Is it me? Am I just the editor of the book and someone who put up a name and then it was this group effort and discussion? Yeah. But I like things to be this open and ambiguous and just see also where it goes and have people react to it. That shows so much more.
I have a 16-part question. First, this seems reactionary. I wondered if you had a plan of study when you enrolled or were planning to go there, and the duration, how that changed.
So that's two questions. Whether I had a plan.
It's not 16 really. It's just. It seems like this is reactionary, and I wondered, like, applying to this school, did you have another plan of study and people you want to collaborate with, or mentors to study under? You're seeing this name, and then it takes on a life of its own. This resulting in this project.
I mean, it kind of works like this. When you apply to that place, you're supposed to send a proposal of what you want to do there. But then usually most people, I think, end up doing something completely different. So for me it was almost the same. I proposed to keep on working on my PhD and some practical aspects of that. But once I got there, this was such an immediate topic, I felt, also among all the other people. And then when I talked to staff and the director, I found out that this has also been something people brought up the years before. So this, in a way, wasn't something new. This was just the first time that we as a group decided to somehow, yeah, materialize the discussion or to do something. And it's also funny because in the first book, I added something which I also found, and that's kind of a similar approach. This is the signs next to the main entrance in the early 2000s, and someone added an E to Jan, making the Hagen Van Eyck Academie. So even back then there was this idea of why is this named after him? And I just found that interesting.
I think this topic goes back a little, not gender specific, but you know, are you familiar with the currency that Oja Oxenard designed, starting in the late 70s probably? But Dutch deliberately made a decision to take men off the currency and put like sunflowers and birds and things instead of dead white guys.
Yeah, it's definitely also there's a discussion happening in the Netherlands right now, as it is in the US, about how are we naming streets, how are we naming squares, whose statues are we putting up, are we removing them, are we adding other statues to them to put them in context. And there's the Center for Contemporary Art in Rotterdam, Witte de Wit, and they're named after a problematic figure, so to speak, of the age of explorers of Dutch history. So they're also in the process right now of, first of all, questioning this name, but then also how to come up with a new name, and what does a name even mean. And yeah, so it's embedded within these discussions. Yeah.
Are there names in New York that pop out to you as a visitor that you've noticed?
There's a really nice text in the book actually about the statue of Sims. He's labeled as the father of modern gynecology, but actually what he did is he was operating on black slave women And now they just recently removed the statue from Central Park and put it into a cemetery in Brooklyn, I think. But before that, there was a discussion of would it be an option to have statues of these women facing it, or put them up in a different space. And then, of course, also all of these Confederate things.
Yeah, it's just,
So-
it's, I think what you're doing with putting the semi-permanent type there, and also, you know, what's happening here with just getting rid of all this Confederate soldiers is whitewashing the past, where, you know, some of the suggestions have been with Sims is putting women confronting him and acknowledging the past, but also acknowledging how we think about it now. And so I think what you did was really an interesting approach, is to put something there that, especially if you're doing the names in orange, so they're not even really blending in at all. And there's always this call to mind of change and what was and what is now, but it's not whitewashing the past at all.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's also interesting to mention that on the inside of the building, not only the female names are peeling off, but the male names are as well. So it's exactly the same material that was used, just another color indeed.
Was the choice of orange because it's a Dutch black color, or did it have any other meaning?
It's actually a color from their official house style. Like they have
The
this.
guidelines. The guidelines.
Yeah, exactly. They have like a book of brand guidelines of sorts, and that was also a rather practical choice because it was the color that stood out the most. The other ones were, I think, a darkish blue, green, and purple. And, yeah.
Contrast.
Right.
What was your reception at the art book fair? Because I know it was like it's like a very crazy place. I mean, like, did you get to interact with people, like tell them about the project, or?
Yeah, some. I mean,
I thought I went to every table, but
Yeah.
I guess I didn't.
yeah, we were in the dome.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, maybe the book fair is not the right place for this. I mean, I had people browse through it, and then to some I would also talk, and then usually people who weren't taken aback by the type-only cover and tried to engage with it, found it really interesting, and then, but
Yeah.
so I think these types of events are more fruitful of a discussion.
The way that you apply your ideas seems to be very much sort of like an installation or just like environmental art. Were you inspired by any artists that maybe do sort of similar installation type work?
Probably unconsciously. There's so many great artists working with typography, but this one really came from the idea of actually staying within their system. So I, as a designer, chose the color orange, and that's about it. Everything else was already given in a way. Yeah. I mean, as long as we're talking about the actual vinyl letters on the wall.
I was just going to say that action of turning the books around the library was really effective. That especially felt like it.
And that
performance
actually
almost.
is inspired by another bookshop, which I think you pointed me to, or Victoria, in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes.
It's mentioned in the book. There's a footnote in that section, and they are a bookshop that only carries fiction. And they did this on International Women's Day or month, like I think last year or the year before. And I'm not sure, someone brought this up, and then we wanted to see what happens if you apply this idea from a literary fiction bookshop to a scientific library of an institution, to be able to compare different fields.
They also looked very kind of abstract, modern Donald Judd, it looked very male when all of it was beautiful.
Because it was all white, or
It was
more
all white, but
right?
it was different levels of it, and so it looked so male in a way, made you more aware of that.
More modernist.
Yes.
Andy Warhol had all his bookshelves in his summer home, like it's, I found a photo online of one of his friends reading a book, and then you see the bookshelves in the back, and they're all spine and
It's kind of fun, you can just like choose one and you don't really know what you're going to choose.
But it was interesting, the library was still working like this. It didn't actually take that much longer time, because every now and then there would luckily be a book that you could see, and then you knew, okay, it has to be between these two, and then, so it was kind of okay. On the practical end of things.
Did it ever happen after I left that they dedicated funds to sort of expanding the collection to be more inclusive in the library? Do you know?
Victoria, who is the librarian, she set out to change their buying criteria in a way. So I think that, especially in the field of artist monographs, there was a big just misproportion, or it's just something they weren't really aware of, I think, even because you never see it like this. You probably guess it's like that, but once you see it, it's more immediate. So yeah, there was also this effect.
Were there any sections of the library that there were more women's books, or no women's books at all, or it was all outside of it? Could you tell? I mean, was there some kind of a...
You mentioned philosophy was
Yeah,
pretty much
philosophy,
exclusively
there were
male.
whole shelves that you just take and
The monographs as well.
The monographs,
Surprisingly,
yeah.
mostly male.
but it's also interesting that in the sections with books that take a lot of caretaking work, like editing or magazines,
Yeah.
those had more women, but then all the contributions had more men in the end. So, and then within gender studies, yeah.
Do you think that is changing right now? I know it used to be male dominated for a long time. All the authors, editors, is all male. But nowadays, if I go to art school, most of my classmates are female students, and there's only one or two male students. I think it's changing. And in the industry, but sometimes I go to like type conference. There's more male designers and
Speakers or
speakers,
Yes.
and then participants. There's more males than I met in class. So usually something happens.
it's a paid position probably.
You know what I mean?
It's been that way for a long time. It's when women go into other careers, they're not as maybe assertive to become art directors. I mean, AIGA not too long ago and was talking about really why there's so many women that go through schools, but then don't become high-end art directors. And do they start families? Do they go into? Are they not as assertive? Like there is no answer. No one knows why, but it has been that way. I'm old, and when I was in school, it was that way. I mean, it's kind of, it's hard to say exactly why.
Was there any other kind of information you got from this? Because I find it kind of a subtle or interesting infographic, because you can look at the size of the books, or like really thick books are men versus women. Do you know what I'm saying? Did you have other observations that we can't see from your book?
It's kind of hard to tell because like I said, there was 11 of us, maybe even more at times, working on this together at different times, and each of us would also develop their own criteria. This is a very simplified chart that I wanted to put in the book just to visualize what we did. But then, and this was also nice, I think everyone kind of came up with their own way of deciding, and so I guess, yeah, I would be careful with drawing conclusions that are too general. But I also had the idea that the more expensive or bigger a book might be produced, those usually tend to be made artist monographs. But that was maybe just a personal
You seem kind of modest about the project, like you don't, like you said, you want to just sort of put it out there and see what the response is.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder if you're hoping this will be a model for other institutions who might be thinking about doing this or something like that, but it sounds like you're not even that deliberate about it. You just kind of wanted to try it here and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I tried, but then also for me the whole thing, and this is also what it says on the back of the first book, it is a tool that I use to investigate these questions, and then part of the outcome is in these books, but these books are not an end to the whole thing. This is just one more manifestation that it takes, and now it can go on, and it will indeed go on, most likely at an art academy in Germany, where we are right now making plans to do something similar. But
I think by like
it's
naming
for
it
the
a
future
case
to
study.
come.
Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think by naming a case
Right.
study, it's like presenting it as like look at this. Here's an example.
Yeah.
You should follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a bridge you should work on. It's called the George Washington. The Martha.
Along those same lines, do you have any hope that this will maybe continue in maybe a larger scale, or that it will lead to other similar developments, or like have you thought about maybe longer term, larger scale influences, like something that studies, maybe multiple studies like this will have?
Not so far. I was really busy putting together the second book, and now, yeah, I mean, my idea right now is to also circulate the book, because to me as a book designer, a book isn't finished when it comes from the printer. That's only part of it, and then the distribution and also reception and making it available to people is almost as important, I think, as all the other steps. So right now I'm trying to get it into collections or libraries so that it's actually accessible. And then back to observing what happens.
Is that what you're working on now, or are you doing other projects also, or it's been?
Yeah, this will keep me busy for a while on the side, but then of course I'm also doing other things to survive. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.